Sky Oceans is a three-dimensional RPG set in a massive world where the Evil Alliance poses a real threat to the world's inhabitants. In this review, we check out how the game feels on the Nintendo Switch and if it's worth buying. Feel free to subscribe to my channel and give the video a thumbs up. Let's go! First, I'd like to say that I am pretty thankful I chose to wait to review the game. Apparently, the developers have been working hard to updating the game. It's been quite a bumpy ride, with the game having some performance issues. But does that mean that everything is now peace and joy? In my opinion, no. There are still things that need to be improved, and I thought we'd look at some of the issues in this video. But let's start somewhere else. In this adventure, we follow Glenn Windwalker, a brave youth who, together with his comrades, takes on the Evil Alliance. But what the Alliance intentions are and why they pose a threat is not entirely clear from the start. It all starts with us getting to see Glenn's relationship with his mother. After they participate in a battle together, they lose touch, and now the question is whether Glenn will be able to see her again. We don't really know if she survived or if she died. But anyway, this is only part of the story, as we also get to see how Glenn and his friends occasionally meet new people who in different ways affect how everything will play out. New acquaintances become possible, which can later prove to be of great help. Personally, I thought that all the encounters, dialogues and the story itself are the game's asset. It is basically not very complicated, as it is quite clear who can be considered evil and good. At least in the beginning, but there is an underlying tension that I find engaging, so both the plot and the story feel solidly worked out. It gets approved. When it comes to the visuals, it's really high and low. I want to point out that this adventure takes place in a very extensive world that delivers everything from green oases, industrial zones to worlds made of ice and snow. So it's clearly varied, but unfortunately it's not always so pretty. In most environments it is mixed up with invisible white walls that spoil the overall impression. At least it doesn't look so good on the Switch. If you fly in the wrong direction, you crash into a wall that looks unpleasantly ugly. The same goes for the characters. You run around in three-dimensional worlds, but the characters somehow look two-dimensional, as if they were once three-dimensional, but someone flattened them and then placed them against a three-dimensional background. The characters clearly stand out. Look at this person's portrait. Looks just fine. And this is how he looks in the game. I ask myself, what happened? Unfortunately, far too many characters look terrible, but as said, I still want to highlight the world that I still think looks perfectly fine. Above all, I appreciate the work that went into creating a detailed and varied world. When it comes to the combat itself, it's actually pretty standard, albeit packaged in an odd form. The battles take place high in the sky and everything is turn-based. You have access to a number of characters that all have different strengths. Some use fire, others cold attacks, and so on. It's a bit of trial and error here about what works and how everything fits together. There is no manual, so you have to figure everything out yourself. Some things were a bit tricky to understand, so you simply have to play and try to figure out what is really going on. But basically, we have seen most of it before. Choose whether to use normal or special attacks, mark your enemy and hope for the best. There are also 3 levels of difficulty in the game, and if you want a challenge, you should definitely choose normal or hard. Easy is very forgiving and the enemy takes a lot of damage. But in summary, I still think battles work well, and if you like turn-based battles that are also presented in a somewhat unconventional way, then this can be a recommendation. Of course, you can also acquire a multitude of useful items that are mainly used in battle. What I found a bit strange though was that if you bought an item and chose not to use it immediately, I had to find a special person who could then give me the option to use the item. And the fact is that the game design sometimes feels a little off. The same went for the quests. Sometimes I would start an important quest, but it was like I had to run in and out of the game to be able to activate them. Very strange indeed. Now, I'm not saying I did everything right, but I think the game made a lot of simple things unnecessarily complicated. And here I was also affected by loading times that were anything but fun. Let's say I switched between a certain zone and my aircraft 2 or 3 times. It could end up with loading times of up to 3 minutes. I perceived it as relatively frustrating. When it comes to performance, there are obvious problems. Above all, I noticed a very low frame rate in handheld mode. It becomes particularly noticeable in some villages. I found myself avoiding certain places because of all the lag. However, I think it flows relatively well in the battles. Admittedly, they are turn-based, so the frame rate here doesn't matter that much. But we also have a third way of playing, and that's when we fly around the open world. Here I could clearly notice a lower frame rate. Add to that, my airplane also happened to mysteriously stop working, so I had to restart the game. Very strange. I would also like to add that I didn't experience the game crashing, so that's a positive. But as a whole, the performance gives a mixed impression. So should you buy this game? The main argument for getting a copy is above all that this is a different RPG. It's a very large game with tons of exploration, tons of cutscenes and dramatic events. So from that perspective, it's worth every penny. But what I perceived as problematic was, among other things, the performance, which was generally disappointing. I would also like to add that the game sometimes feels a bit confusing, especially when it comes to the missions and being able to solve different quests. The game design feels a little strange. I also want to mention the menus, which I think feel relatively easy to use, but I would have liked to have seen that there was a manual or description that allowed me to read about how everything was connected. Sometimes things happened without me having a clue why. Explanations were very scarce. Maybe it sounds like there are little problems everywhere, and I'd probably say that's the case. Certain parts, such as the story and the fact that we're actually exploring a gigantic world, feels perfectly fine. But this is contrasted by confusion, performance issues and gameplay solutions that I wish were different. So my score is 5 out of 10. It's fun with a different RPG set in the air, but it's far from perfect. But what I really wonder about is why some things feel very good while others look terrible. Check this out. You see NPCs moving and planes attacking. I like it. It brings the game to life. But at the same time, I stop and look at the smoke from the houses. Why does the smoke look like a grid pattern? And the same thing with the invisible walls. At the very least, I would have liked them to disappear completely and be replaced with something else, because it just doesn't look good. So the visual impression is mixed, but if you're lenient with certain things, here is a game that is very extensive. And that said, this is a different kind of RPG that might appeal to all those who enjoy turn-based battles set in the sky, and where you as a player can also fly around or run around and explore different places. Having said that, feel free to subscribe to my channel and give the video a thumbs up. Have a great day. See ya!